Everything was ready. The cameras were locked, the lights were burning money by the second, and more than 200 people were holding their breath, waiting for Clint Eastwood to step into position. This was a $20 million production, already under pressure, already behind schedule, and the next take mattered. In moments like that, nothing stops a film. Not delays, not doubts, not emotions. Then, just seconds before the command to roll, Clint froze. One sentence, whispered quietly beside him, cut through the noise of the set and changed the course of the entire day. No one knew what was said. They only saw a legendary actor lower his gaze, lift his hand, and bring everything to a halt. The ticking clock stopped. Crew members stared at each other. Producers calculated losses in their heads. This wasn't anger or chaos. It was something heavier, something deliberate. Whatever Clint had just heard carried more weight than money, schedules, or reputation. And in that suspended moment, before anyone understood why, a simple truth began to form. What was about to happen had nothing to do with a movie, and everything to do with what kind of person chooses to stop the world silently. To understand why this moment mattered, you have to understand where they were and what was at stake. The production was deep in a remote location, far from studio comfort, where every truck, every light, every hour had to be planned days in advance. Hundreds of crew members were on payroll, all synchronized around a tight schedule that left no room for hesitation. At this level, a film set doesn't run on inspiration, it runs on discipline, and Clint Eastwood was known for exactly that. He wasn't the kind of director who chased drama or indulged emotion. He showed up prepared, efficient, precise, respected by crews because he never wasted their time. Money was bleeding by the minute. A project of this size burns through tens of thousands of dollars every single hour it stands still. Permits, equipment rentals, union rules, overtime clauses, weather windows that could close without warning. When the cameras stop, the losses don't pause with them. They compound. That pressure hangs over everyone silently, reminding them that hesitation has a price. This is why sets like this don't stop, not for distractions, not for personal matters, certainly not for something unplanned. And that's what makes this moment so unsettling. Clint wasn't reacting as a celebrity chasing goodwill or headlines. There were no reporters, no audience, no benefit to be gained. Stopping here meant explaining himself to producers, justifying delays, absorbing financial consequences that would land squarely on his shoulders. It meant choosing friction over efficiency, responsibility over convenience. Ask yourself honestly, in a system built to reward momentum, how often does someone in power choose to slow everything down? That question is the tension in the air right now, because whatever forced this pause had to outweigh the logic that keeps entire industries moving. And in moments like this, most people default to habit. They protect schedules, defend budgets, follow precedent. That's how systems survive. But systems don't measure meaning, they measure output. And Clint understood that difference better than most. He had spent decades earning trust precisely because he didn't confuse speed with leadership. So when he stopped everything, it wasn't hesitation, it was judgment, the kind that comes from knowing that some decisions cost money and others cost something far harder to replace. Once lost, those moments never return, no matter how powerful or prepared you believe yourself to be, in the very end. Michael Torres was 9 years old, small for his age, with a fragile frame that made every movement seem like an effort. Diagnosed over a year earlier with an aggressive brain tumor, he had already endured treatments that promised hope but delivered only pain, leaving his parents in a constant cycle of hope and heartbreak. Doctors had given him a timeline that no parent ever wants to hear. Perhaps only days remained.
And yet, in the midst of monitors, IVs, and sterile hospital walls, Michael held a singular wish, a desire that had survived the chemotherapy, the tests, and the exhaustion of his young body. He wanted to see a real Western, to feel, even briefly, the world he had loved through old films and stories, a world of cowboys, horses, and dusty saloons that had become a safe escape from his reality. His parents, weary yet desperate, had tried everything within their power to grant it, navigating rules, protocols, and security that seemed insurmountable. Each attempt ended with another locked door, another polite refusal. And in that tension, the fragility of his wish became palpable. It was delicate, almost impossible, yet it burned brighter for its impossibility. How often do we watch someone's final hope drift away, powerless to intervene? This is the kind of weight that bends time and tests character. And as Clint Eastwood was about to learn, sometimes the value of a life cannot be measured in schedules or budgets. When confronted with such human urgency, even the most disciplined professional must ask himself what truly matters. The world could wait. A boy's dream could not. Clint Eastwood had just been briefed, a quiet word from his assistant cutting through the controlled chaos of the set, and suddenly the world he had meticulously organized seemed to pause. Hundreds of people, from grips to costume designers, stopped mid-action, their eyes shifting from their tasks to the man who carried authority without needing to assert it. The weight of a whisper had pressed against the framework of this $20 million production, and for a moment, no one moved. Clint didn't yell or gesture, he simply listened, his gaze steady, absorbing the words, weighing them. The boy's situation unfolded in that single exchange, a life tethered to hours, fragile yet urgent, and it demanded more than reaction, it demanded judgment. How often do we confront a choice where every second has a price, yet the right path isn't measured in money or efficiency? The crew held their collective breath as Clint's expression remained unreadable yet purposeful. He asked questions, not orders, probing for clarity, seeking to understand the gravity before acting. His restraint created its own tension, a quiet acknowledgement that something extraordinary had just landed in their world. The cost, the schedule, the expectations, all of it was suddenly secondary to the human element. In that moment, authority became empathy, and power became careful attention. The silence stretched, charged with anticipation, while everyone waited for a decision that would not just stop a scene, but challenge the very rules they had always trusted. And when Clint finally moved, it was deliberate, thoughtful, measured, a choice that spoke louder than any shout, proving that sometimes the weight of one person's humanity can hold a room, a set, and perhaps even the world in perfect balance. The moment of possibility arrived not with words, but with movement. The cameras had stopped, the lights dimmed, and the production that had been humming like a living organism now held its breath, waiting for the impossible to unfold. Logistics shifted with surprising speed. Trucks and equipment rerouted, crews reorganized, every detail calculated to transform sterile hospital halls into a place that could hold magic. And then, slowly, deliberately, Clint Eastwood led the way, showing that action speaks louder than any speech. The boy, Michael, who had been confined to his bed, suddenly became the center of something extraordinary. He was no longer an observer of life through a window or a screen. He was an essential participant, a figure whose opinions and choices mattered more than any script note or director's cut. As the makeshift set took shape, every light, every wooden panel, every small detail whispered intention, a silent promise that this day had been remade for him. Clint placed a chair with Michael's name on it, where he could watch, a subtle yet profound acknowledgement that in this moment the boy's presence was not tolerated, it was required. And then came the hat, a simple object that carried history, respect, and trust, placed carefully in Michael's hands, passing a legacy from one generation to the next. Can you feel the weight of that gesture? The room, transformed and charged, became a space where the impossible felt tangible, where hope had a shape and a sound. In that suspended time, Michael's eyes brightened, the corners of his mouth lifted, and the energy of participation surged through him. He was no longer powerless, no longer a passive witness to life's cruelty. Instead, he was a valued contributor, an advisor to the moment unfolding. His voice invited, his decisions counted. Every heartbeat in that room echoed with recognition and validation, proof that when compassion chooses to act, it creates awe. This was not a scene for a movie. This was a living testament to what happens when humanity overrules expectation, when the impossible becomes real, and when a single life is honored in a way that money, schedules, and logic could never have orchestrated. What happens after a moment like that? How do you measure the ripple of a single act of compassion when it touches a life hanging by threads? For Michael, the days that followed were not what anyone expected. Doctors had given a bleak timeline, yet
something shifted in those hours, something no chart or prognosis could predict. He lingered longer than anyone anticipated, each day a quiet miracle, a subtle testament to the power of being seen and valued. And it wasn't just survival, it was connection. Clint didn't disappear when the cameras rolled again. Letters arrived, messages, small gestures that reminded Michael he was more than an observer. He was part of a story bigger than the set, bigger than Hollywood, bigger than any schedule or budget. His parents watched, astonished, as their son, fragile yet alive, became a beacon of hope to everyone around him. The crew who had witnessed the pause carried the memory with them, retelling it as proof that empathy and action can redefine what's possible. Recognition came quietly but profoundly, in notes, gestures, and in the simple acknowledgement that a boy's opinion had mattered to a legend. Can you imagine the weight of being remembered in this way? That what you contributed, however small it seemed at the time, had shaped lives and created hope? The story didn't end with the scene. It extended into months of renewed purpose, teaching everyone involved that the impact of a single courageous choice resonates far beyond its moment, echoing in ways the heart recognizes before the mind can comprehend. After that day, nothing on Clint Eastwood's sets would ever be the same. He had witnessed firsthand what happens when someone's life is valued above schedules, budgets, and prestige, and he carried that lesson into every production that followed. Can a single choice truly shift culture? In his case, it did. Policies changed quietly but decisively. If a sick child wanted to visit a set, the answer was always yes, no exceptions, no debate. The ripple extended beyond his own films as other directors, inspired by the example, began to prioritize humanity over efficiency, proving that influence is measured not by awards or box office numbers, but by the lives we choose to honor. Time, Clint had realized, was infinitely more valuable than money, and compassion more powerful than any schedule. Each set visit, each small accommodation became a ritual of respect and care, reminding everyone involved that moments of courage and kindness define legacy far more than accolades. The story of that boy, Michael Torres, and the day a $20 million movie paused remains a touchstone, a benchmark for what leadership and humanity can look like when aligned. Isn't it remarkable how one decision made with clarity and heart can echo across decades, inspiring empathy and courage long after the cameras have stopped?
Some things matter more than movies, and in that truth, every person present and everyone who hears the story discovers a measure of greatness that transcends fame, profit, or awards, leaving the world quietly, profoundly changed.